You walk into a car dealership, excited to buy your first car. The salesperson greets you with a warm smile and says, "Good news. We have a special deal today. This car, fully loaded, for just $20,000. That's within your budget." You shake hands, feel the thrill of the purchase, and start picturing yourself behind the wheel. But just as you're about to sign the paperwork, the salesperson frowns and says, "I just checked with my manager. Unfortunately, I made a mistake. That price doesn't include some mandatory fees. It's actually $23,000. At this point, you're already mentally committed to the car. You've imagined owning it, maybe even bragged to friends about the deal you got. So instead of walking away, you agree to the new price. You just got lowballed. This psychological trick is devastatingly effective. It works by getting you to commit to something before the full cost is revealed. Once you've made a decision, even based on misleading information, you become emotionally and mentally invested. Backing out now feels like a loss, even though the terms have changed. One of the most famous studies on lowballing involved college students. Psychologists asked them to participate in a study. Most agreed, but after they committed, they were informed the study required them to show up at 7 a.m. Even though that's an inconvenient time, most stuck with their original decision instead of backing out. This tactic isn't just used in sales. It appears in job negotiations and even relationships. A recruiter might promise a dream job with a high salary, only for the offer to suddenly include longer hours, lower pay, or extra responsibilities. In more manipulative scenarios, lowballing is used to control people. A cult or extremist group might invite someone in with seemingly harmless requests. Attend a seminar, listen to a speech, meet some people, but after committing, they're slowly asked for more and more. By the time they realize how deep they're in, they've already accepted so many conditions that turning back feels impossible. Because the real danger of lowballing isn't just about losing money, it's about losing control. Have you ever noticed how an unfinished task lingers in your mind like an itch you can't scratch? A song that cuts off before the final chorus, a movie that stops just before the climax. It's unbearable. Your brain refuses to let it go. That's the Zygarnik effect, and it's one of the most sinister psychological tricks ever discovered. Now, imagine if someone weaponized that feeling, if they deliberately left things unresolved just to keep you hooked, anxious, and desperate for closure. This isn't just a psychological quirk. It's a tool of manipulation used everywhere, from marketing to mind control. The effect is named after Bluma Zygarnik, a Soviet psychologist who discovered something strange while observing waiters in a cafe. They could remember every detail of unpaid orders, but immediately forgot them once the bill was settled. In other words, the brain prioritizes unfinished business. Loose ends demand attention. Advertisers exploit this mercilessly. Think about cliffhangers in TV shows. Why does every episode end right when things get interesting? Because the brain hates incompleteness. It fixates on what's left unfinished, making you obsessively crave resolution. That's why people binge watch entire seasons. It's not just entertainment, it's a psychological trap. But the real darkness lies in how the Zeigarnik effect is used to control people. Cult leaders, manipulative partners, and even interrogators intentionally withhold closure to keep their victims mentally trapped. A toxic boss who keeps dangling a promotion just out of reach. A narcissist who disappears mid-conversation, leaving you desperate for an answer. A political figure who stirs fear, but never provides real solutions. They all rely on the same tactic. Leave the brain hanging, and it will chase the answer indefinitely. And the worst part? Most people never realize it's happening. You don't need chains to keep someone trapped. Sometimes, all it takes is a whisper in their mind, one that makes them question everything they once knew about themselves. The most insidious form of control doesn't come from force or coercion. It comes from planting a simple thought. What if I'm not good enough? This is the art of sowing self-doubt, a psychological trick that can dismantle confidence, reshape reality, and keep someone locked in a cycle of second-guessing themselves. And the worst part? Once the seed is planted, most people water it themselves. A classic example, the infamous Milgram experiment. While it's often remembered for obedience to authority, there's something more subtle at play. Participants weren't just pressured into shocking others. They were gradually led to doubt their own moral instincts. At first, they resisted, but after being repeatedly told, "It's fine, keep going, you have to do this," they began to question their own judgment. If they hesitated, the authority figure reassured them, and with each step forward, their resistance weakened. By the end, they weren't just following orders. They had convinced themselves that their hesitation was misplaced, that maybe they were overreacting. That's how self-doubt works. It doesn't strike all at once. It seeps in slowly, often through calculated, strategic manipulation. It can start with a simple comment. "Are you sure that's the right choice? That doesn't sound like you. You always mess things up like this." When repeated enough, it forces the brain to spiral. It makes people look for evidence that maybe, just maybe, those doubts are true. And once someone starts believing it, their confidence collapses like a house of cards. Skilled manipulators use this to control others without ever lifting a finger. If you make someone doubt themselves enough, they'll look to you for validation. They'll become dependent on your approval, constantly seeking reassurance that they're making the right choices. Over time, they lose trust in their own judgment and start deferring to the person who knows better. This is how toxic relationships thrive. It's how abusers keep their victims trapped. It's how cult leaders maintain absolute authority. But here's the most terrifying part. Self-doubt, once ingrained, doesn't just go away. Even if the manipulator disappears, the seeds they planted continue to grow. The voice of doubt remains, whispering, "Maybe they were right about me." And that's why this trick is so dangerous. It doesn't just break people, it makes them break themselves. There's a saying, never underestimate the power of a fool. But what if the fool isn't really a fool at all? What if playing dumb is a carefully crafted manipulation tool, a way to control situations, lower people's defenses, and gain the upper hand without them ever realizing it? The power of playing dumb is one of the most underestimated psychological tricks, yet it's been used for centuries by politicians, criminals, and even everyday manipulators. One of the most well-known examples of this trick in action is the legendary detective Columbo. He was famous for his disheveled appearance, slow speech, and almost clueless demeanor. Every suspect underestimated him, dismissing him as a bumbling officer until he caught them in their own contradictions. That's the essence of this tactic. When you appear less competent or less intelligent, people reveal more than they intend to. They drop their guard, assuming they are in control. But how exactly does this work? First, playing dumb gives the illusion of harmlessness. If someone appears clueless, they don't seem like a threat. People are naturally inclined to take charge when they perceive someone else as struggling, which puts the dumb person in a position to be underestimated. This is especially effective in negotiations, social interactions, and even legal situations. By pretending to be oblivious, the manipulator gathers information without suspicion. They let others over-explain, fill in details, and unknowingly expose their weaknesses. Then there's the art of selective incompetence, pretending not to know how to do something so that others step in and take responsibility. Employees use this trick all the time to avoid extra work. A person who doesn't know how to set up a presentation, cook a meal, or fix a computer might be fully capable, but by feigning ignorance, they push the responsibility onto someone else. It's a passive form of control, one that forces others to step in, do the work, and ultimately hand over power. This trick also thrives in social manipulation. Have you ever noticed how some people pretend to misunderstand or misinterpret a situation just to avoid accountability? By acting confused or unaware, they dodge blame. When caught in a lie, a manipulator might say, "Oh, I had no idea that's what you meant," or "I must have misunderstood." This forces the other person to second guess their own stance, making them appear unreasonable for holding the manipulator accountable. But the darkest side of this trick is its ability to exhaust and frustrate its target. Imagine trying to argue with someone who pretends they just don't understand your point, no matter how clearly you explain it. The more you try to clarify, the more they feign confusion. Eventually, you give up, frustrated, exhausted, and sometimes even doubting yourself. This is psychological warfare in its simplest form. It creates a mental loop where the victim becomes increasingly anxious, struggling to make sense of something that isn't actually rooted in confusion, but in deception. In politics, this tactic is often used to deflect responsibility. Leaders may feign ignorance about scandals or mistakes, claiming, "I was never informed," or "I don't recall that happening." It buys them time, shifts blame, and creates uncertainty about the truth. When done skillfully, it allows them to escape scrutiny, while their opponents waste energy trying to prove what should have been obvious. At its core, the power of playing dumb is about control. It exploits trust, lowers defenses, and manipulates people into revealing too much or taking on burdens they shouldn't. It's a reminder that not every fool is foolish. Sometimes, the person pretending to be lost is the one leading you exactly where they want you to go. Imagine you walk into a store to buy a new suit. The salesperson greets you with a warm smile and immediately brings out the most expensive option in the store, a designer suit that costs well beyond your budget. You shake your head, saying it's too much. But then they show you a second suit, still pricey, but significantly cheaper than the first. Suddenly, this second suit seems like a bargain, and you convince yourself it's a great deal. Without realizing it, you've just fallen for the contrast principle, a psychological trick that alters how we perceive value, making things seem better or worse depending on what they are compared to. This principle works because our brains don't evaluate things in isolation. We understand value by comparison. A $100 shirt feels absurdly expensive if you've just been looking at $20 shirts. But if you've just been shown a $500 jacket, that same $100 shirt suddenly feels reasonable. This mental shortcut happens so fast that you don't even realize you're being influenced. It's one of the most effective persuasion tactics in existence. Salespeople, marketers, real estate agents, and high-pressure negotiators use it constantly. Ever noticed how luxury car dealerships show you the most expensive models first? That's by design. After seeing a car that costs $100,000, a $60,000 car feels like a steal, even if it's still outrageously expensive. But here's where it gets truly dark. This trick isn't just used in sales. It's used to manipulate behavior, decisions, and even how we judge people. And the real danger of the contrast principle? It isn't just that people use it against you. It's that you might never even realize they did. You yawn when someone else yawns. You laugh when the room erupts in laughter. Your brain isn't merely observing, it's mirroring. While this instinct strengthens human connection, it can also be turned against you in ways you'd never expect. At the core of this manipulation are mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that activate not only when you perform an action, but also when you witness someone else performing it. These neurons are why you flinch when someone gets hurt or instinctively smile when another person smiles at you. They are the foundation of empathy, bonding, and social influence. However, like any powerful tool, they can be weaponized. One of the most notorious examples of this is the rise of Adolf Hitler. He didn't simply deliver speeches, he mirrored the emotions of his audience, reflecting their fears, frustrations, and hopes right back at them. His words weren't just statements, they created emotional feedback loops, amplified by the crowd's reactions. He didn't persuade with logic, he made people feel. And once emotion takes over, critical thinking is suppressed. But mirroring doesn't require a massive crowd to be effective. Salespeople, politicians, cult leaders, and con artists use it constantly. A manipulator will subtly mimic your posture, tone, and gestures to make you feel comfortable. Your brain registers the similarity and subconsciously thinks, this person is like me. I can trust them. That's why skilled con artists can get you to open up within minutes. They're not just listening, they're reflecting you back to yourself. This trick runs even deeper. Mirroring can manufacture attraction and loyalty. Studies show that when someone subtly imitates your body language, you are more likely to like, trust, and agree with them. even if you've just met. This is how toxic relationships often begin. An abuser might start by mirroring their victim's personality, interests, and values, creating an illusion of perfect compatibility. Once that bond is firmly in place, the manipulation shifts. The abuser stops mirroring and starts controlling, knowing their victim is too emotionally entangled to leave. And this isn't just a tactic used by individuals. It's built into the systems we interact with daily. Social media algorithms function as digital mirror neurons. Have you ever noticed how platforms feed you content that aligns with your existing beliefs? That's no accident. Algorithms reflect back what you already think and feel, reinforcing your biases and filtering out anything that challenges them. Over time, this creates echo chambers, polarization, and an inability to see other perspectives. So, how can you protect yourself? First, recognize when you're being mirrored. If someone mimics your mannerisms too closely or mirrors your emotions too perfectly, pause and question their motives. Second, disrupt the pattern, change your posture, shift the conversation, or introduce an unexpected idea. A genuine person will naturally flow with the conversation, while a manipulator will struggle because they rely on predictability to maintain control. Mirror neurons make us human. They enable connection, learning, and empathy. But in the wrong hands, they become tools for manipulation, turning your own instincts against you. And the most frightening part? When done skillfully, you won't even realize it's happening. What if I told you that some of your memories, the moments you swear happened exactly as you recall, might be completely false? That someone could plant a memory in your mind and you would believe it just as strongly as your real experiences? It sounds like science fiction, but in reality, memory is one of the most fragile and easily manipulated aspects of the human mind. That makes it a perfect tool for control. Take the infamous Lost in the Mall experiment by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus. Participants were told stories about their childhood, some real, some entirely fabricated. One was simple. As a child, they had once been lost in a shopping mall. At first, the subjects had no memory of this, but after repeated questioning and subtle suggestions, many began remembering details: who found them, what the mall looked like, how they felt. They swore it had happened, even though it never did. Their minds had filled in the blanks, constructing a completely false memory. This wasn't just people misremembering. It was memory being rewritten. Our brains don't store memories like a camera capturing moments in perfect clarity. Instead, every time we recall an event, we reconstruct it, pulling together fragments, filling in gaps, and unintentionally changing details. Here's the terrifying part. The more you recall a memory, the less accurate it becomes. That means, with the right influence, someone can alter your past, changing how you remember events, reshaping your emotions, and even convincing you of things that never happened. One of the easiest ways to manipulate memory is through suggestion. A simple phrase like, "Are you sure that's what happened?" or "I remember it differently" introduces doubt. Your brain, wanting to maintain consistency, starts adjusting its recollection to match the new version of events. Over time, you adopt the false memory as your own. Then comes reinforcement. If multiple people confirm the false memory, whether they are lying or simply misremembering, it becomes reality. Social agreement is one of the most powerful tools for shaping memory because the brain values collective certainty over individual doubt. If everyone else remembers it that way, maybe you're the one who's wrong. And this isn't just an eerie quirk of the mind. History has seen terrifying uses of memory manipulation. False confessions in criminal cases have been extracted by police interrogators reconstructing events until the accused believes in their own guilt. In abusive relationships, manipulative partners rewrite history, convincing victims they were at fault for things they never did. Governments and propaganda machines have altered historical narratives, reshaping public perception to serve their agendas. Memory forms the foundation of identity. It shapes who we are, what we believe, and how we see the world. But what happens when someone else takes control of it? If your past can be rewritten, then so can your future. And by the time you realize your mind has been altered, if you ever do, it's already too late. What happens if someone repeatedly tells you that you're insane? Initially, you'd reject it. You know who you are and trust your own mind. But over time, something shifts. Maybe you are a difficult person. Maybe you do overreact. Maybe you're not as rational as you once believed. If enough doubt creeps in, you might start believing the one thing you never thought possible. Maybe they're right. This is gaslighting, a psychological weapon designed to make you question your own perception of reality. It's more than just lying. It's the deliberate erasure of truth, replacing it with something more convenient for the manipulator. The worst part, by the time you realize what's happening, if you ever do, you're already trapped. The term originates from the 1944 film Gaslight, in which a husband gradually convinces his wife that she is losing her mind. He dims the lights in their home, then denies any change when she notices. His goal? To make her doubt herself so completely that she becomes dependent on him. But this isn't just a cinematic trope. It's a real-world manipulation tactic used in toxic relationships, cults, politics, and even corporations. Gaslighting works by destabilizing reality itself. It begins subtly. The manipulator denies things they've said or done, even when confronted with proof. I never said that. You're imagining things. At first, you argue back, but hearing the same denials repeatedly chips away at your confidence. Next, they attack your ability to think clearly. You're always so dramatic. You overanalyze everything. Eventually, you start doubting your own judgment, convincing yourself that maybe you are the problem. Then comes emotional manipulation. Any reaction you have is dismissed. Why are you so sensitive? You always blow things out of proportion. The goal is to make you question your right to feel the way you do. Soon, you start second-guessing your emotions, apologizing when you shouldn't. Finally, isolation sets in. Gaslighters don't want you hearing outside perspectives, so they slowly cut you off from external influences. They claim your friends are making you paranoid, that your family doesn't really understand you. Bit by bit, They become the sole authority on what is real. At this stage, they no longer need to manipulate you. You do it to yourself. You stop questioning them. You silence your doubts before they even have a chance to surface. You accept their version of events, not because you want to, but because your mind no longer trusts itself to disagree. Gaslighting is terrifying because it doesn't just manipulate your thoughts, it rewrites who you are. It makes you abandon yourself, handing over control to someone else without even realizing it. And by the time you finally see the truth, if you ever do, it feels impossible to break free. Because how do you fight back when you don't even know what's real anymore? Ever notice how, the moment something seems limited, exclusive, or hard to get, you suddenly want it more? It doesn't matter whether it's a luxury car, a rare sneaker drop, or even someone's attention. Scarcity makes things irresistible. And the disturbing part? It's one of the most exploited psychological tricks in existence. Think about Black Friday. Every year, people trample over each other for discounted TVs and microwaves, not because they desperately need them, but because they've been told supplies are running out. Stores manufacture scarcity, creating the illusion of high demand. It doesn't matter if the same product will be available next week. In that moment, people act impulsively, driven by the fear of missing out. This trick hijacks your brain at the deepest level. When something is scarce, your survival instincts kick in. Thousands of years ago, scarcity meant life or death. If food, water, or shelter was limited, you fought for it. That instinct still lingers today, making you irrationally chase anything that seems rare, even if you don't actually need it. That's why luxury brands limit production. The fewer handbags available, the more people crave them. It's why social media influencers lock content behind paywalls. The illusion of scarcity makes it seem more valuable. It's why dating apps make people obsessed with those who play hard to get. The less you can have them, the more you want them. But this psychological trick isn't just about selling products. It's been used to manipulate entire societies. Totalitarian regimes restrict information, making people desperate for what they can't access. Cult leaders use it to control followers, convincing them that only they hold the truth and the outside world offers nothing. And the most unsettling part? Scarcity makes people blind to logic. When you believe something is slipping away, you stop asking whether you even want it in the first place. First impressions are powerful, but what if I told you they don't just shape how we feel about someone? They distort everything we see. This is the halo effect, a psychological trick so subtle yet so manipulative that it can make someone appear smarter, kinder, or even more trustworthy than they actually are, simply because of one positive trait. And once that halo is in place, it's nearly impossible to break free from its influence. Imagine sitting in a courtroom, watching two defendants on trial for the same crime. One is well dressed, well spoken, and carries themselves with confidence. The other appears disheveled, nervous, and avoids eye contact. Without knowing any details of the case, who seems more guilty to you? Studies show that attractive, confident individuals are more likely to be perceived as innocent while those who appear nervous or less polished are assumed to be guilty, even if the evidence suggests otherwise. That's the halo effect in action. This trick works because the human brain is wired to take shortcuts. Instead of evaluating every aspect of a person, we latch onto one striking trait, like attractiveness, charm, or intelligence, and use it to assume everything else about them. If someone is physically attractive, we subconsciously believe they must also be kind, competent, and trustworthy. If someone speaks with confidence, we assume they must be knowledgeable. If someone is in a position of power, we naturally believe they deserve to be there. It's why politicians win elections based on charisma rather than policy. It's why serial manipulators get away with lies. It's why leaders who appear strong and authoritative are often blindly followed, even when their actions are questionable. The halo effect doesn't just influence perception, it actively shapes reality. Think about media coverage. Celebrities admired for their talent get the benefit of the doubt when scandals emerge, while someone already viewed negatively is instantly condemned. It's not logic, it's the halo effect distorting judgment. Marketers exploit this trick masterfully. Ever wondered why luxury brands hire attractive, well-dressed models? They're not just selling clothes or watches. They know that if you associate their brand with beauty and status, you'll subconsciously assume the product itself is superior. You're not just buying a car, perfume, or suit. You're buying the illusion of prestige that surrounds it. But the darker side of the halo effect is its ability to shield dangerous individuals from scrutiny. Charismatic leaders can hide corruption behind their charm. Manipulative partners can make people ignore red flags simply because they seemed caring at first. Even history's worst figures often had an aura of leadership that blinded people until it was too late. The halo effect is one of the most insidious psychological tricks because it doesn't just fool people, it makes them confident in their false judgments. And once someone believes in an illusion, they'll defend it, even when evidence contradicts their perception. He's a good guy. He wouldn't do that. She's so charming. She must be telling the truth. Breaking free from the halo effect means questioning first impressions. It means looking past charm, status, and appearances and asking, what am I not seeing? Because sometimes the people who seem the brightest are simply casting the longest shadows. There's a reason why cult leaders, abusive partners, and authoritarian regimes rarely resort to physical chains. They don't have to. The most powerful form of control doesn't come from restraint. It comes from making someone believe they can't function without you. This is the calculated strategy of engineered dependence, a psychological manipulation that compels people to surrender their independence, willingly placing their lives in someone else's hands. And it's so effective because it exploits something deeply ingrained, the human need for connection. It begins by gradually eliminating choices, not through force, but through subtle persuasion. A partner plants the idea that your friends don't genuinely care about you. A group insists your family is toxic and should be cut off. A leader murmurs that only they possess the truth, and the outside world is full of dangers. At first, these seem like mere suggestions. Then, they turn into unspoken rules. Eventually, they solidify into unquestioned beliefs until one day you realize you're completely alone. Once isolation is in place, dependency follows. The manipulator becomes the only source of reassurance, validation, safety, even access to basic necessities. They manufacture problems only they can resolve. They withhold affection until submission is absolute. In extreme cases, they seize control over finances, decisions, even physical mobility. And eventually, the victim no longer makes choices for themselves, not because they don't want to, but because they've been conditioned to believe they're incapable of doing so. The cruelest part? They think it was their decision all along. They're not physically trapped, yet they stay, not because they are restrained, but because their entire reality has been rewritten so thoroughly that leaving no longer feels like an option. This method has been used time and time again throughout history. Cults separate their followers from loved ones, ensuring the leader becomes their sole source of truth. Abusive partners wear down self-esteem until their victims believe they are worthless on their own. Totalitarian regimes restrict information, making their citizens feel helpless without the very system that oppresses them. And once someone is broken down in this way, no force is necessary to keep them in place. They remain, even when escape is within reach, even when the door is wide open. Because when your entire identity has been molded around someone else's control, freedom doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like a threat. You step into a store, and soft classical music plays in the background. Suddenly, you feel a little more sophisticated, perhaps even inclined to spend a bit extra. Later, at a restaurant, you glance at a menu printed in elegant cursive script, and the pricier dishes seem far more tempting. You assume you're making these choices freely, but in truth, you've already been influenced. This is priming, one of the most subtle yet powerful psychological techniques. It works by implanting an idea into your mind without you even noticing, making you more likely to think, feel, or behave in a certain way. There's no coercion, no direct persuasion, just a quiet suggestion to your subconscious, steering your decisions before you're even aware of them. One of the most well-known examples of priming in action is the old age experiment. In this study, researchers had participants unscramble sentences containing words like wrinkled, bingo, and Florida. Afterward, they measured how long it took them to walk down a hallway. The results? Those exposed to words associated with aging walked significantly slower, without realizing why. Their minds had been primed to feel older, and their bodies unknowingly reacted to that suggestion. This psychological trick is everywhere. Supermarkets place fresh flowers at the entrance to create an unconscious link between their store and freshness. Political campaigns repeat the same slogans over and over until they feel familiar, and therefore more trustworthy. Even hiring managers can be unknowingly influenced by priming. If they read about failure earlier in the day, they might judge a job candidate more harshly. Priming works because the human brain thrives on patterns. It constantly seeks connections, even when none actually exist. If you hear the word yellow, you'll recognize banana more quickly than an unrelated word. If you see a particular brand logo repeatedly, You may start to trust it, even if you've never purchased their products. But here's where it gets even more unsettling. Priming isn't just about subtly nudging choices. It can shape entire narratives and alter perceptions. News outlets carefully select words to influence how you interpret a story before you even read the details. A crime report that uses the word youth instead of gang can shift public perception of the event. A company referring to layoffs as right-sizing makes mass job cuts sound like a smart business move instead of a crisis. And the effects of priming can be even more extreme. In courtrooms, a single word can sway a jury's perception. When witnesses are asked, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other vehicle? They estimate higher speeds than when asked, how fast was the car going when it bumped into the other vehicle? That one word, smashed, can distort memories, altering how people recall an event. Social media feeds are a constant breeding ground for priming. Every like, every recommended post, every trending topic subtly influences the way you think before you've even had a chance to form your own opinion. Even something as simple as a change in color or font can impact emotions. Studies show that people exposed to the color red tend to perform worse on tests, likely because red is subconsciously linked to danger and correction. The most unsettling part? Once you've been primed, you rarely question it. If you're primed to view someone as dishonest, everything they do will seem suspicious. If you're primed to expect a negative experience, you'll unknowingly search for evidence to confirm that expectation. Priming doesn't just affect a single moment, it rewires the way you filter reality itself. So ask yourself, how many of your thoughts are truly your own? And more importantly, how many were planted before you even noticed? Ever wonder why people refuse to part with awkwardly made DIY projects? Why parents treasure their child's messy school art? Or why assembling a piece of furniture yourself makes it seem far more valuable than something already built? It's not about the quality, it's about the effort. This is the IKEA effect, a psychological phenomenon that makes people overestimate the worth of anything they've put effort into, even if the final product is flawed. The term comes from the well-known furniture brand IKEA, which sells budget-friendly, self-assembly furniture. But the genius behind their business model isn't just about cutting manufacturing costs. It's about fostering attachment. Research shows that when people construct something with their own hands, they assign it a much greater value than an identical pre-assembled item. The act of putting in effort tricks the brain into forming an emotional connection, making individuals more reluctant to discard, return, or even acknowledge any imperfections. But this psychological trick isn't just about furniture. The IKEA effect is a tool of manipulation used in workplaces, relationships, and even cults to create a sense of investment that's difficult to break away from. Companies exploit this principle by encouraging employees to contribute ideas, making them feel personally tied to the organization, even when they're underpaid or overworked. Toxic relationships operate on the same principle, where one partner is constantly made to earn the approval of the other, strengthening their emotional attachment despite the imbalance. Cults and extremist groups go even further, assigning newcomers difficult or humiliating tasks, deepening their sense of commitment and making them less likely to question their new beliefs. What makes the IKEA effect so dangerous is that it creates a psychological trap. The more effort you put into something, the harder it is to walk away, even when logic says you should. This is why gamblers keep placing bets after losing large sums. Why people stay in failing relationships long after the love is gone. Why employees remain devoted to toxic companies despite poor treatment. The brain convinces itself that if so much energy has been invested, then it must be worth it. And here's where it becomes even more unsettling. This effect isn't limited to objects or relationships. It can influence entire belief systems, political ideologies, conspiracy theories, even dangerous social movements thrive on this principle. Once someone has invested enough time, effort, and personal identity into a belief, letting go feels impossible. Instead of admitting they've wasted their energy, people will distort reality just to protect their convictions. So, the next time you find yourself clinging to something, ask yourself, do you truly value it? Or have you simply put in too much effort to let it go? This psychological manipulation is so powerful that it can push people to abandon their principles, remain in harmful relationships, and feel trapped in situations they can't escape. It's not hypnosis. It's not mind control. It's something even more insidious. And the most unsettling part? Most people don't even recognize when it's happening to them. Imagine this. A mother tells her child, if you leave me and move away, I don't know how I'll survive. A partner insists, if you really love me, you wouldn't question me. A friend reminds you, after everything I've done for you, you owe me. These aren't just guilt trips. They're intentional strategies of control. This is emotional blackmail, a form of psychological coercion where someone manipulates your emotions, playing on your fear, guilt, and sense of duty to get their way. They don't ask. They don't demand. Instead, they make you feel as though refusing them would make you heartless, selfish, or even put someone in danger. Before you realize it, you find yourself agreeing to things you never wanted because saying no feels unbearable. And this tactic isn't just used by individuals. Entire organizations, communities, and movements have been built upon emotional blackmail. Take organized crime, for instance. Criminal organizations have employed this method for generations. A prime example? The mafia. Their power isn't just about threats and violence. It's about manipulating loyalty, family ties, and unspoken obligations to keep people obedient. A small favor is granted, a gesture of generosity extended. But there's an unwritten rule. Failure to repay the favor isn't just seen as disrespectful, it's considered betrayal. Walking away isn't just dangerous, it's framed as morally wrong. That's how deeply emotional blackmail can take hold. But you don't need to be part of a criminal syndicate to fall victim to this tactic. It happens everywhere. In relationships where one partner threatens to leave unless they always get their way. In families where control is maintained through outbursts, guilt trips, or the silent treatment. In workplaces where employees feel guilty for setting boundaries or saying no. And it always follows the same pattern. The demand, subtle or direct. The manipulator wants something from you. But rather than simply asking, they lay a psychological trap, the emotional trigger. They spark guilt, fear, or obligation. Maybe they act deeply wounded. Maybe they explode in anger. Maybe they withdraw affection entirely. The solution: they offer you a way to fix the situation. If you just do what I say, everything will be fine. The trap closes. You comply, not because you must, but because resisting feels like it will destroy everything. So, how do you escape? The first step is awareness. If someone is making you feel like your emotions are being weaponized against you, take a step back. If setting a boundary results in threats, guilt trips, or emotional retaliation, you're being manipulated. And the most effective way to break free? Stop engaging. Don't argue. Don't justify. Don't explain. Simply refuse to participate in the game. Because here's the unsettling truth. Emotional blackmailers don't seek love, fairness, or respect. They crave control. And the moment they realize they can't manipulate you anymore, they either escalate their tactics or move on to find their next victim. Imagine you're given two choices. Option A, you gain $100. Option B, you lose $100. Which one affects you more? If you're like most people, the sting of losing that money feels twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining it. This is loss aversion, a psychological effect that makes the fear of losing something far stronger than the excitement of gaining it. And this fear? It influences far more of your decisions than you might realize. Take casinos, for example. They understand this principle better than anyone. When you win, they blast bright lights and play celebratory sounds, reinforcing the thrill in your brain and making you crave more. But when you lose, silence, no flashing lights, no dramatic sound effects, just nothing. Why? Because they know that losing already feels painful enough. And here's the twist. Most people who lose money don't walk away. Instead, they desperately try to win it back, chasing their losses in hopes of avoiding that painful feeling of loss becoming permanent. But loss aversion isn't just about gambling. It's woven into everything, from marketing to personal relationships. Ever notice how companies push limited time offers? Or how online stores warn you that there are only two left in stock? That's because the moment your brain registers that you might miss out, it panics. You may not have even wanted that product, but suddenly, now that it's slipping away, you feel an urgent need to buy it. Now take this concept and apply it to toxic relationships. Manipulators use loss aversion to keep people trapped. They don't make you fear what they're giving you. They make you fear what they could take away. They convince you that without them, you'll be alone, unloved, or left struggling. And this is exactly why so many people remain in harmful situations. It's not because they're happy. It's because the fear of losing what they have, no matter how toxic, feels far worse than the uncertainty of leaving. Think you're immune to this trick? Think again. Every single day, politicians, advertisers, and social media platforms exploit this effect. Act now, or you'll miss out forever. Your rights are being taken away. Everyone else is ahead of you. The world isn't just presenting you with choices, it's carefully shaping your fears, making sure you dread the wrong ones. So ask yourself, how many of your decisions were truly yours? And how many were just desperate attempts to avoid losing? In today's world, we encounter people so deeply manipulated that they seem completely detached from reality. They embrace the unbelievable, defend the indefensible, and reject even the most undeniable truths. But how does someone reach this point? What exactly is brainwashing? And what step-by-step process allows such a drastic transformation to occur? Brainwashing isn't just a concept from dystopian fiction. It's one of the most powerful and effective psychological tactics ever used. And the most terrifying part? No one is entirely immune. A chilling real-world example, the Jonestown Massacre. In 1978, over 900 people, including children, lost their lives after consuming cyanide-laced punch, all under the command of cult leader Jim Jones. These weren't individuals who suddenly chose to obey a madman. They were methodically conditioned, step by step, until their ability to think critically was completely erased. They genuinely believed they were acting on their own free will. That's the true power of brainwashing. It doesn't force you to change. It makes you want to. So, how does it work? It follows a clear and highly effective process. Isolation, destabilization, indoctrination, reinforcement. Once someone falls into this cycle, breaking free feels impossible. Step 1. Isolation. Control the information a person can access, and you control their perception of reality. Jim Jones achieved this by relocating his followers to a secluded compound in Guyana, cutting them off from outside perspectives. In everyday life, this happens through media bubbles, extremist groups, and even toxic relationships, where a single narrative is endlessly reinforced. The less exposure someone has to different viewpoints, the less likely they are to question anything. Step 2. Destabilization. Next, break down the person's mental defenses through exhaustion, fear, and confusion. Cults accomplish this with marathon sermons, unpredictable punishments, and constant emotional turmoil. Governments use endless crisis narratives, making people feel that the world is too chaotic to understand without their guidance. The more mentally drained someone becomes, the more they depend on the manipulator to interpret reality for them. Step 3. Indoctrination. Now comes the implanting of new beliefs, and the key is reward and punishment cycles. If you conform, you're praised. If you question, you're punished. In cults, doubting the leader leads to exile. In society, questioning the wrong ideology can get you socially canceled. Over time, this conditioning rewires the brain. The forced belief no longer feels forced. It feels natural. Step 4. Reinforcement. Once the brainwashing is complete, the new identity is constantly reinforced through rituals, groupthink, and identity-based loyalty. At this point, people stop questioning altogether because their beliefs have become part of who they are. They don't feel manipulated. They don't think they've been controlled. Instead, they believe they have discovered the truth. And that's the most terrifying part. Brainwashing never feels like brainwashing. It feels like enlightenment. That's why people stay in abusive groups, succumb to mass manipulation, and follow extreme ideologies without ever stopping to question them. How do you protect yourself? The first step: awareness. Brainwashing works by making critical thinking feel unnecessary, or worse, dangerous. The moment you feel pressured not to question something, that's your warning sign. The second step: expose yourself to multiple perspectives. If you only ever hear one side of a story, you're being controlled, even if you don't realize it. And the third step: watch for emotional manipulation. Fear, guilt, outrage. These are the tools used to bypass logic. Whenever your emotions are being used to shape your beliefs, stop and ask yourself, who benefits from me thinking this way? Because once your mind has been rewired, you won't even realize it happened. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone seemed to steer your thoughts without you even realizing it? Before you knew it, you were agreeing, nodding, and feeling an odd sense of trust toward their point of view. That wasn't by chance. It was a deliberate technique. It's called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, a collection of psychological strategies so subtle and highly effective that entire industries have been built around them. At its foundation, NLP is about shaping people's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors through language and subconscious cues. It operates by identifying patterns in speech, body language, and mental associations, then gently guiding them toward a specific outcome. When used ethically, NLP is promoted as a method to enhance communication, boost confidence, and improve persuasion. When used maliciously, it becomes a weapon for deception, manipulation, and even psychological control. A well-known NLP trick: the embedded command. One of the most famous NLP tactics is the embedded command, a hypnotic technique where a directive is disguised within casual conversation. Instead of directly stating, "You should trust me," an NLP expert might subtly phrase it as, "You might not have realized it yet, but you're already starting to trust what I'm saying." The suggestion is planted, and your mind absorbs it without resistance. Another NLP strategy: mirroring. This technique involves subtly copying a person's body language, speech rhythm, and energy levels. Without realizing it, your brain perceives this as familiarity, which naturally builds trust. Cult leaders use this to create deep emotional connections. High pressure salespeople apply it to disarm skepticism. This is why you sometimes feel an instant bond with someone you've just met, without understanding why. The most unsettling NLP technique: anchoring. Anchoring links a specific emotion to a particular word, gesture, or stimulus. If a manipulator repeatedly makes you feel safe and reassured when using a certain phrase, your brain begins to associate that sense of security with them. Later, even if they are deceiving you, hearing that same phrase will still trigger trust in your subconscious. The real danger of NLP: it's not just that NLP is effective, it's that you won't even realize it's being used on you. You take a pill, swallow it, and within minutes, the pain starts to fade away. A wave of relief washes over you, your body reacting exactly as you expected. But what if I told you that this pill was nothing but sugar? No medication, no active ingredients. Yet your brain believed it worked, and so it did. This is the placebo effect, one of the most astonishing psychological discoveries ever made. It proves that sheer belief can alter the body's physical state. And while it might sound like a quirky feature of human psychology, the reality is far more disturbing than you'd expect. A real-life case. The man who healed himself, then died. Let's go back to the 1950s. A man named Mr. Wright was battling terminal cancer. Doctors had given up hope, but in a last-ditch effort, his physician administered an experimental drug, one that was supposed to be a revolutionary breakthrough. The results were nothing short of miraculous. His tumors shrank rapidly, and he made a full recovery. But here's the shocking part. The drug was completely ineffective. The moment Mr. Wright learned the truth, his cancer returned almost immediately, and he passed away shortly after. This is the sheer power of belief. When the mind is convinced something is working, the body obeys. The science behind it. Mind over matter. Research has shown that when people take fake painkillers, their bodies still release real endorphins, natural painkillers produced by the brain. In some studies, placebo surgeries, where doctors pretend to perform an operation, have led to actual recovery, despite no real procedure being done. Even Parkinson's patients have exhibited improved symptoms simply because they thought they were receiving treatment. But here's where things take a darker turn. The dark side, the nocebo effect. If belief can heal, it can also harm. This is called the nocebo effect, the evil twin of the placebo effect. Instead of tricking the brain into getting better, you convince it that things are getting worse. Tell someone a harmless pill will make them sick, and their body manifests real symptoms: nausea, headaches, even severe illness. This has been weaponized throughout history. Voodoo curses have reportedly caused death, not through magic, but through belief. Medical frauds have tricked patients into thinking they were recovering until it was too late. Clinical trials have shown that patients sometimes suffer serious side effects, not because of the actual drug, but because their mind expected them. The unsettling question. Think about the implications. If belief is powerful enough to reshape your biology, then how many times in your life have you been manipulated without realizing it? How often has your pain, relief, illness, or healing been driven by expectation rather than reality? And more importantly, who has been shaping those expectations? The attention is intoxicating. The affection is overwhelming. Finally, you found someone who truly sees you, really sees you. They shower you with compliments, send an endless stream of texts, tell you that you're special, that they've never met anyone like you. It's intense, thrilling, almost too perfect. And that's because it is. This is love bombing, a psychological manipulation designed to make someone emotionally dependent, only to pull the rug out from beneath them. It's not real affection. It's a setup, a carefully constructed illusion. How love bombing works. This tactic hijacks the brain's reward system. When someone overwhelms you with positivity, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical that fuels addiction. It's a high, an emotional rush that feels irresistible. And that's exactly the point. In romantic relationships, this might show up as extravagant gifts, pushing for instant intimacy, or making dramatic declarations of love within days of meeting. In friendships or workplaces, it's the feeling of an instant connection, an overwhelming wave of flattery and praise that feels almost unreal. But the real trick isn't just in the excess, it's in the reversal, the trap, from obsession to indifference. Once the target is hooked, the withdrawal begins. The good morning texts suddenly stop. The warmth fades. The once endless compliments turn into cold detachment. Or worse, criticism. The same person who made you feel like the most important person in the world now pulls away, leaving you scrambling to figure out what went wrong. The psychological manipulation. And here's where the real control sets in. Instead of recognizing the pattern, the victim blames themselves. They replay every conversation, questioning what they did wrong. They lower their boundaries. They try harder to fix things, desperate to get back the intensity of the beginning. What they don't realize is that the honeymoon phase was never real to begin with. The science behind the cycle. This pattern, intense love followed by sudden emotional withdrawal, is a psychological trap. It's called intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The victim never knows when the affection will return, so they keep chasing it, tolerating worse and worse treatment just to feel that high again. The hidden power of love bombing. This tactic is used by narcissists in relationships to maintain power, cult leaders to keep followers loyal and obedient, toxic workplaces to manipulate employees into staying despite mistreatment. The unpredictability of love bombing creates an emotional roller coaster, one where the victim becomes so focused on getting back that initial high, they fail to see how much control they've already lost. By the time they recognize the cycle, it's often too late. They're mentally drained, isolated, and doubting their own instincts. Picture this. You're browsing an online store when you find the perfect item. Then, a bold red timer flashes beneath it. Only two left in stock. Sale ends in 3 minutes. Your heart starts racing. You don't have time to analyze whether you truly want it. If you hesitate, you might lose it forever. So, you hit buy now, and just like that, you've been manipulated. This is the power of urgency, one of the most effective ways to control human decision making. It overrides logic, triggers impulse reactions, and the worst part? Most people never even realize it's happening. A real-world example. Mass panic over a fake crisis. Take the 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast. When Orson Welles performed a fictional alien invasion disguised as a news report, thousands of people panicked. Why? Because it felt immediate. There was no time to think critically. Before anyone stopped to verify the information, reports of alien attacks were already spreading. That's exactly how urgency works. It hijacks your mind, making you act first and think later. The science behind urgency manipulation. This psychological trick exploits loss aversion, a bias where people fear losing something far more than they desire gaining something new. When you believe an opportunity is slipping away, anxiety takes over. Your judgment becomes clouded, and suddenly, you're making emotional decisions instead of rational ones. Marketers weaponize this constantly. Limited time offer, flash sale, only a few left. Buy now before it's gone. These aren't just phrases, they're psychological traps. Buying isn't a choice anymore, it's a race. And the moment you feel rushed, you've already lost. The darker side. How urgency is used to manipulate people. It doesn't stop with sales tactics. Cults, scammers, and con artists depend on urgency to trap victims before they have time to think clearly. Pyramid schemes pressure recruits into making quick financial decisions. Act now, or you'll miss your chance to get rich. High pressure salespeople push contracts with the classic line, "This deal won't be available tomorrow." Scam callers pretend to be government officials, demanding immediate payment under threats of legal action. The more pressure you feel, the less likely you are to stop and question what's really happening. Even governments and media use urgency to control perception. Urgency isn't just used by marketers and scammers. It's a tool of politics and mass media. Fear-based headlines, emergency press conferences, breaking news alerts. These tactics provoke immediate emotional responses, ensuring people react before they have time to analyze the facts. When people are afraid, they don't stop to verify information, and that's when misinformation spreads the fastest. Look at history. Wars erupt, stock markets crash, riots explode overnight. More often than not, these moments of chaos are fueled by a manufactured sense of urgency. When emotions take control, critical thinking shuts down, and that's the exact moment people become easiest to manipulate. How to protect yourself from urgency manipulation. The scariest part? Urgency feels natural, like you're making the right decision. But in reality, someone else has already made it for you. So the next time you see a countdown timer, a limited time offer, someone urging you to act immediately, pause. Because the moment you feel rushed, there's a good chance you're already under someone else's control.